Anyway, Demonic Tart, Pip, I'm not exactly sure how you prefer, what alias you prefer to go by, but thank you so much for submitting your game. I've already got it downloaded and ready to go. I'm to understand it's a scary game, so I hope my reactions are in line with what you're expecting. And no worries, Lurk, not a lie, I know that this is, the stream is usually not a very convenient time for you. I'm warned that there are loud noises in this game, so we're AP headphone users, I suppose. But, let's see. Oh yeah, I mean, so how about this? Pip, what I'll do is I'll give the game a try. I'll play it first so you can get my impressions, my experience with the game, and then afterwards we can have a bit of a chat about it. If that sounds good. Okay. Play recording. You've been expecting me, huh? Find the exit. Seems like... Okay. Yep, WASD to move. And then shift. Red light is a guide. Okay, good to know. You can see the red lights. Okay. Ooh. You tried to grab my computer's username, but unfortunately, I tried to type in my email address of Bluish Green Productions, and my computer was just like, that's too many letters. Let's just make it Bluish for no reason. Okay. Yes, left shifted my dash. And there's my red light, which is my guide. Okay. Bip, 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 bip. Going to be spooky things. Blue dots aren't spooky. Crackly TVs. So I assume at some point, yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you were expecting a reaction, but unfortunately, I was kind of expecting like, hello, yeah. Interesting about the timing though, because the first time I was like, it's been a while. I'm expecting to run into something, and then the second time is like, oh, okay, there's the thing. So this is procedurally generated, I believe. Okay, so can I outrun this thing? No, I can't. Okay. Well, hang on, I do have a sprint. What? Okay. Okay, Lurk Not Lie, I admit I just understood your joke about escape located, or exit located via, I assume you mean just like pressing escape. What does pressing escape do, by the way? Nothing. Okay. Huh? Okay, follow the red dot. Is this just a lighting artifact? So there was different loading messages that time. Is anything actually going to be different? Let's see. Hello. Okay, so can I just hold that down? Oh, I guess there's... I have a limited stamina, maybe? I can go pretty fast. Okay, there's the end. I'm gonna try not to get killed this time. Is there going to be a creature between me and the end? Is it a guarantee that there will be, or is there just a chance of it? Well, I made it. Oh. Okay. Oh, right, I can press L to toggle the light. Is there more? Oh, no, it's just over. Okay. Well, okay. I gotta admit, I was um, expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was. I was expecting short, but not necessarily that short. Anyway, I'll click on to the voice general channel now, and we can have a bit of a discussion about the game while I leave this up. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can also hear you all right. I just muted the stream so that I won't get
Yes,
horrible
the
echoes.
double. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for submitting the game. Uh, I don't know what was before I ask anything else. What was your reaction to my reaction?
I mean, it was uh it wasn't a bad reaction, mind you. Uh, I don't know. I'm happy you played it.
Okay, fair enough. I just mean in terms of this is supposed to be spooky, creepy game, and it probably didn't phase me very visibly. Um, that's usually the case with horror games. Just so you know, like just for some context
Yeah,
about me, I don't, I'm not one to like get crazy freaked out. I'm not immune to spooks.
yeah.
And the only reason it didn't spook me the first time is because I was like just running that prediction in the back of my brain of like, I think now is about the time that I'd expect to be scared. And then there it was.
Yeah. The so when it comes to the actual horror of the game, the primary horror that the whole thing is based around. Sorry, one second.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Sibling wanted to join the stream and watch, and I was like, I'm talking right now. So, when it comes to the actual horror, originally the goal when I made this game wasn't to make a horror game, but rather I was wanting to practice my programming, and specifically I wanted to revisit an old prototype of mine which used procedural generation. And originally I wanted to program an AI that could actually navigate the spaces that I made. But as I made the game, the original prototype, it turned into a horror game. So when I wanted to remake it, I wanted to make a version of it, but better. And when it came to the actual horror that I used, it's more so meant to be atmospheric than it is meant to be like a oh my god, I'm standing at the edge of my seat kind of horror.
Yeah, of
And
course.
in terms of the lore behind the game, because there's actually lore hidden in the game itself. The rundown of it is that there's this guy, this doctor called Lysander, and he works for a mysterious institute, which will likely show up in other games that they make in the future. And he works for the department known as 10 o'clock. He has a mysterious patron, and the logs basically going through them, they talk about a couple of things. I don't want to spoil in case anyone from the chat actually wants to play it. But the main idea of it is that it's slowly the entity which inhabits the game and which inhabits the space is a creature of distortion and pure auditory pain. Which is why the creatures known as the Jollies are the way that they are. They are essentially human bodies that have been mashed up together into a big, meaty, flying, psychic ball of pain and emotion.
I see. Yeah, very, very conceptually unsettling for sure.
Yeah, the writing in it hopefully is a little bit more unsettling than than, than the reaction that you had to the
Well,
game.
I mean, only insofar as I wasn't aware of any of that when I played the game. Like, I even made a point of reading through the itch.io page, but none of that, like, that's the set dressing for the sort of world that you've created, but it doesn't present in this game.
Yeah, it's hidden. People that want to look into it can find it, but it's made in such a way where like you have to play a couple of generations into it, and you get a sliver of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I did notice that after what was like my fourth or fifth attempt, the text between levels changed.
yeah, the text has about 20 different loading circumstances where it will say stuff like analyzing level, loading level, and then occasionally every fifth one that I've had is supposed to be an unsettling one. So it will say something like loading flesh or creating mistakes. That one's more of a joke.
Right.
But yeah, overall, this was meant to be a very, very small project. And ideally, what this is meant to be used as is as a prototype in my portfolio as a game developer, so showing, hey, I can take an idea and within a week, like, create a project which fully explores the idea.
Yep, absolutely. That's incredibly important to be able to demonstrate that, like, beginning, like, seeing something through from idea to finished product. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, by your own goals, then, would you say that it was successful in that regard?
It's honestly blown me away in terms of how many people have actually ended up playing it and talking about it. Because originally, when I uploaded the original prototype of it, something like I got 10 people to view it, and I got 2 downloads and no comments. Currently, on this one, I'm sitting at around 50 downloads and 200 odd views. And 2 Let's Plays, which was surprising. But yeah, it was pretty good overall.
Yeah, I guess it's. I think a lot of these channels are looking for the next big spooky game that is going to get good reactions out of them and presenting a good, a good thing to react for. And I guess they're almost approaching it in terms of like an entertainment factor. Sorry, I'm speculating, and that's not fair to say that there isn't genuine merit in both your game and the other games that they play, but I can't help but think of that as an outsider. Of like, oh, if I have an audience of people that want to see me freak out, then I gotta seek out the things that are going to make me freak out to make it a satisfying, entertaining show.
No, don't worry. I'm like I wouldn't take offense at that. Like one of the whole reasons why the Jollies act the way that they do is because I wanted to play into the sort of idea of how it's done in horror, because it delivers a good enough end state to the action with a bit of build up to anticipation. So you can actually get away from them, by the way. You just have to make sure that you dash correctly and close the lights so that they can't see you.
Right, yeah.
But most people really struggle with that, so if I was going to revisit it, I'd probably tweak how easily they run after you, or at least the speed that they run after you. Yeah, but yeah, the thing that I was saying, yeah, it is a game where a thing screams at you occasionally, and it's supposed to elicit a reaction of but like not. There's a difference between being startled and being properly scared or unsettled. And generally I do a lot of writing. And in my writing I prefer to elicit an unsettled response in my reader, while when making short, snacky games that are horror-based, I do like the set dressing to be somewhat unsettling, but the actual payoff is much easier to just go, thing screams at player reacts game over screen reset
Yeah.
level.
No, it's very true because it's something that I've thought a lot about and why I haven't ultimately made a horror game myself. Because I wouldn't want to make something that is just a jump scare type game. I would
Yeah.
want to pursue that sort of unsettling feeling and or the actual like being afraid for something. And it's not something that I've encountered much in the media that um, I don't know. It's very self-selective of me because I seek out horror things in the first place, and I also don't. Um, I don't get spooked by stuff much in general. Like
Yeah.
so, yeah. If I were to create something, um, it would have to be something that I'd be confident that I could achieve that level of like horror and sort of a deeply unsettling or uncanny sort of space, and it's very difficult to achieve. Do you
Yeah.
have any ideas for how you might do something like this?
So, in terms of advice when it comes to horror and video games, I would say that action games that have action that give the ability to the player to move around dictate that the loss state in that game uh, gives an end to the action, meaning you're most likely going to force yourself into a screamer scenario. However, games which operate through something like a point and click or a narrative that is text based or some sort of sequence, um, basically a game that does not directly control the movements of the player, the horror in that can come through narrative horror, constructed horror, the horror of change, where let's say the player character begins to sort of lose their sanity, and that sort of level of unsettling and disgust would be the sort of thing that you'd maybe be after.
Gotcha. Yeah. That sounds like a absolutely solid advice. I also just noticed that Munek is mentioned, that they're also working on a horror game. And also we've got Owl Dude 420 joining us. So hello, Owl Dude. And if anyone in chat has a game that they would like to submit, then I will put this link here in the chat so that you can drop your game on the Discord and I can check it out once we're done with our conversation here, playing the Lysander Experiment. Which, speaking of, I will make sure to link that as well so that people can try it out if they would like. So, not sure if player character losing sanity isn't patented. Oh, no, that's actually a good point. Nintendo does hold a patent for the sanity meter as presented in Eternal Darkness, I believe. But other
Yeah.
games have done sanity stuff that kind of skirts the line, and they still seem to not have any legal troubles as far as I'm aware.
Personally, I'm not a fan of giving essentially visual representation to the quantity of sanity that someone has. Because unlike health, where you can sort of think, oh, okay, well, I'm at half health, or I'm one hit away from dying, my character should look and act this way. There isn't necessarily a difference between, oh, I'm at sanity level 1 versus sanity level halfway through, in terms of how you think you would feel, because sanity is such a much more complex and diverse sort of asset. Instead, the way that I like to see it, at least in things that I've seen, is messing with the way that the player interacts with the world. It's to do with the small sort of details that have to do that go around. Um, I'm
Yeah, I
trying to
mean, I
remember
completely
the
agree. Just insofar as like, by the time you quantize your character's sanity, it almost helps it to become predictable, which is contrary to the purpose of horror in the first place.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, you don't also there is this thing in horror which which comes from more sort of. Sorry, there's a message in the chat.
Yeah. Yes, the anticipation is what Owl Dude is pointing out.
Yeah, the anticipation. The anticipation is really good for sort of building up, but it's really in the payoff, in the climax that you need to, that you need to. It's essentially the designer's job to find a way to, deliver that, because in a way the anticipation, the build-up, is in a sense a promise to the player that I'm going to give you something that is worth the anticipation, and building up the anticipation and then not delivering it, it can be much worse than giving something that is just qualitatively worse in the first place, because what you make in your mind will be 100 times scarier than what is displayed on the screen.
Very true. So do you feel like it comes across as a bit of a broken promise if there isn't a solid punch to the build-up?
I mean, there's two ways to go about it. Either you have an explosive end where essentially you have the monster from Amnesia that suddenly, it's been teased for a couple of levels, you're safe at the start, but then suddenly it comes after you, starts chasing you, and that's basically the payoff. Or alternatively, you could turn all that buildup of the horror into just absolute dread, which happens in stuff like Cultist Simulator, where you take that eldritch feeling of discomfort that you have at not knowing what's exactly going on, and just turn it into a sort of dreadful, oh no, almost like everything is rotting around me.
Right.
Is the way that I like to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like, at least in an action game, it is important to pay off that dread or fear or suspense with something, because otherwise the fear just goes away. If you get it in your head that, well, there's no fail state, I can't die, nothing's at stake. So, yeah, I mean, that's the read I have on it at least. That and in this case, the sort of I don't know. I guess the fail state of the game was trying again with a new, different generated dungeon. And
the text says attempt number and increases the number. And it actually saves it on your computer. So now if you boot it up again, it will say attempt number, whatever, going forward.
And that was the thing that I mentioned it on the stream as well. But because the name of my computer just unceremoniously got cut off as Bluis, it's like, oh, that's kind of less climactic than you might have hoped it would have been.
Yeah, so with some players it works, with some other players it doesn't. What I was hoping to do was use the name that people give for Windows, because typically people give their actual name for their Windows account. However, and this game is only for Windows, so sorry Mac users, I don't have a Mac and don't have the ability to playtest if that works. So the issue that I had was I never found anyone online telling me, oh, how do you retrieve the name? So I had to figure it out on my own, and what I ended up doing is just going, well, okay, I can depend that everybody has a C directory and that everybody has users, so I'm just going to ask it, tell me what directory you're currently in, and ignore anything past the users thing, and then delete anything before those characters, and then retrieve that, and that always retrieves whatever is in the user's file.
Yeah, that's a really clever way of going about it. Luke Nautilus mentioning PC being called R2D2, it would have been kind of surreal and funny to come across.
We've been expecting you, R2D2. Yeah. Hopefully, in the future, I can find a better way of accessing that, but currently I'm stuck with all I'm stuck with.
Yeah, of course. We have we have limited ways of seeking this kind of information out about the player, and like, let's be honest, that's probably for the best that you can't just
Yes.
like reach
Most
in and grab
definitely.
information.
I had a friend of mine who doesn't know about much about programming suggest that I take I scan their computer for login information on sites and take the username from the site, and I was like, that I am not willing to cross that boundary. Especially because I have a Patreon now, and I've said that I'm sharing all my source files on my Patreon, and no, I'm not willing to share something that directly goes into people's login information on my Patreon.
Gosh. Yeah, I can see how that would be. Like, it's a. I can see where the idea came from. Absolutely, it's just a little problematic in execution. Well, make sure to drop a link to your Patreon in the chat, and yeah. I guess as far as feedback on the game itself, I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Could I plug for a moment?
Go for it.
So, real quick, the Patreon that I have is there's 3 tiers. One is the lowest one being Goblin Friend, and it is for just £1 a month. And I am struggling to actually find my page.
Take your time.
There we go, found it. So with Goblin Friend, you get access to Patreon-only posts, behind-the-scenes content, access to piplib, which is my coding library, which I've amassed over time, and you get a personal thanks from me. And I'm currently trying to find a job in the industry, and I need. Well, I don't necessarily need the help, but it would certainly be a lot less stressed.
No, let's be honest. Everyone needs the help. Everyone is like you're whatever you're gonna get, you're gonna make use of.
My internet just
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
So we've got Goblin Friend, Mysterious Benefactor.
Yep. Mysterious Benefactor that allows for patron voting power. Allows people to put sort of decisions that I put a poll up and they say, oh, like I prefer this over this, and then the corporate overlord essentially can tip the scales completely and ask for a specific feature in whatever game I'm developing, and I will have to somehow shoehorn it in because I believe restrictions are the birth of creativity.
Gotcha. Moonek is asking where it is that you're from. I don't know if you're comfortable saying roughly region wise.
Complicated. So I'm a third culture child. I was I originate from Greece, but I've traveled quite a bit, and I grew up in Asia, and yeah. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, I mean it's a I don't know. That's certainly a far more in-depth answer than I guess most people would be willing to give. It's like, oh, for me, it's pretty easy. Like, I mean, you can still say that I'm Canadian, but my lineage is pretty directly Hungarian. So even my dad was from Hungary, but it's still pretty basic in terms of the fact it's like, yeah, Hungarian background, but born and lived in Canada my whole life.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't identify as being from any particular country. Like I don't say that I'm Greek or Chinese.
Yeah, I would say the same. Like I don't think that. I think there is a healthy level of like cheering for the society and the the good of humankind in the world, but you don't have to identify with a particular nation. Where you're born doesn't define you.
Yeah.
So if you want to cheer for your home team at the Olympics, that's pretty harmless. But we are all citizens of a global community, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I would certainly hope the Olympics would happen after the pandemic is over, but
yeah.
Oh well.
So, Moonek has mentioned wondering about getting into the industry and help. Neither power in Greece nor China. I see. Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, no, that it's basically impossible to do in Greece or China, at least from the outside, because currently I'm not in China. Um, but yeah, I want ideally to get in the UK, and ideally, more specifically, in Scotland, because reasons.
well, I wish you the best of luck with your Patreon. And let's see, in terms of actual feedback on the project itself, um, I'm trying to think from a sort of high conceptual level. I'm of two minds on something. For the one part, the fact that the game is procedurally generated means that there's always an uncertainty and not knowing where something is going to be. So that's great. But on the other hand, I also can't help but notice that the reason I succeeded on that last seed was because I had a pretty easy path from beginning to end that didn't require me to go past any of the name that you use for them,
Jollies.
Jollies. I was gonna say joyous, and I was like, that's not right. So, yeah, did you try to tweak any of the settings to ensure that the player would always cross the path of at least one jolly or something like that?
So I'll tell you what happened, because there is an interesting story behind that actually. So originally, so the way that the map generates is that it generates the space first and then decides where the end room is, and the end room is the last room to be generated.
Right.
Then it makes a list of all the rooms that only have one exit to them and says these are the potential rooms.
Okay.
Then it spawns in all the enemies. And then originally what I was going to have it do was say which room is the room that has the highest enemy density around it. So essentially each of these rooms would check, and if they had a certain amount of enemies in them, they would gain 1 point. And then the room that had the highest amount of points would essentially be the one chosen. Guaranteeing that the player would have the essentially the most difficult time, and would have to interact with the jollies. But there was an issue for some reason with the timing, and it decided to just completely ignore it. And then when it didn't, and it finally worked, I kept getting the issue that the highest generation would also sometimes be the one that is the closest to the exit room, and because jollies move, they would often move out of the way, completely changing the density and making it completely almost irrelevant why you would go the long way round. So in the end, what I did was that it chooses the room that is the farthest away from the end goal, and just I'm putting my bets that a jolly will spawn and a jolly will be in the way there. It is sadly a roll of the cosmic dice, and I've made the internal parameters because not only did I want to make it procedurally generated, but I also wanted to have control over how big the map is. I didn't want it to be 100 rooms, but I didn't want it to be only 4 rooms. So what I ended up choosing is that it's at least a minimum 9 rooms big.
Okay.
In that way, it actually forces the generation to at least roll the dice. What was it? It was something like at any chance there is about 3% chance that you get an entire generation with no jollies in it. Which is, it isn't unlikely, but necessarily, but it is less than likely.
Right.
But the generations that have one jolly in them instead of no jollies actually are something like closer to like 20-30% roughly, and then like going up again. The average generation basically has about 3 jollies.
Okay. So, if you had the algorithm working exactly the way that you wanted it to, without necessarily having responsibility to program it yourself, do you have an idea of how that would work?
So I think what I would do is I would go back to the ranking system from before, going with enemy density, and I would actually change the algorithm that is used for pathfinding instead. So instead of making the jollies, so the way that the jollies work is that they will choose a room at random that they haven't been to previously. So if they just came from this room, they won't want to go back unless they are forced to. So what I would do instead is that I would want them to judge which room is closer to the player, so that they're always slowly approaching you, looking for you, and the closer they are, the more sort of noise they make and saying, "I'm looking for you," stuff like that. That would mean that enemy generation essentially makes it so that enemy density room placement makes it so that the jollies would be an immediate danger to you, and that way it would be sneaking past them and then going to the exit room while they're essentially basically slowly chasing you, and that creates for a better horror experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one thing I'll mention, I said before that I haven't made a horror game, and I do count that to be true. However, I did make a game with zombies in it. There's a zombie in my closet. I made this a couple years ago based on a dream I had, but it's a very like Hotline Miami-esque experience. So that's why I say it's not exactly horror, because you are punching your way past these zombies.
Yeah, horror versus spooky is also a different.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I say that it doesn't count. But one thing that I think was quite successful in this game is that the number of enemies are randomized. The spawning positions of the enemies are randomized. And at a certain threshold, which is not entirely clear to the player, when you've killed roughly 75% of the enemies in the game, which again, because of the random number that can spawn, it's impossible to determine when that is going to happen. A intelligent zombie will spawn that will pathfind to the player no matter where they are in the play space. So you could be in the middle of punching your way through a crowd of zombies in a room, and one of these intelligent zombies will spawn behind you and catch you completely off guard. And those kind of moments where something bad is going to happen, that you're going to have to deal with this intelligent zombie, still dies in the same number of hits as every other zombie. They just have the better pathfinding.
Yeah.
But that kind of having something coming up behind you is like one of the best things you can do with horror, because if you have like a jolly in front of you that you're trying to run away from, and you double back on yourself, and you're coming from a path that you just came from, right? This is the most powerful thing, right? You think the space is safe because you just came from there.
Yeah.
And then one shows up there and it's cornering and pincer maneuvering on you.
Yeah.
That really gets people freaked out.
Originally, I did have a plan, but I had to scrap it because I'm currently working on a contract with a group, and I didn't want to spend so much time on the project. The idea was essentially the player has a circle perimeter around them, and if a jolly spends like a couple of cycles outside that perimeter, they will disappear from their location and reappear somewhere off screen. And they will. It must be off screen, or it won't happen. That way, they will randomly go somewhere where their player previously thought there's no jollies here. Also, originally, jollies actually didn't move with rigid bodies and stuff. They just literally hovered over and through stuff, which did create an eerie effect, but it made being chased by them a literal nightmare to try and balance. I mean, right now they're hard to escape, but before they were impossible to escape.
Yeah, I can imagine. I also worked on a game with a top-down chase mechanic in it before. I'm gonna just pull that up for visual reference here. It doesn't look like it, but this game, Robo's World: The Zarmok Fortress, which is a 2D platformer, however, it featured a top-down fast travel system where you, the player, are represented as this little blue avatar here, and you can see there is this enemy that is chasing after you, right behind you. And what this enemy does is a bit of a like it charges at you, and if you sort of dodge out of the way, then it will go past you and have to make kind of a wide turning radius before it comes back after you. But it can pass through walls, and it means that you can kind of dodge it if you're quick. But again, you also like die in one hit, and you've got these eyes that are
it does like a
looking-
ramming maneuver.
Exactly, yeah. So you've got they usually don't exist unless you get spotted by one of these eyes, and then one of these enemies will spawn in and chase you until you can get it killed as well. There are things that are hazards to the player that are hazards to this thing as well. And so you have to kind of manipulate that, both to evade it and also to eventually kill it, so you can get back into a calm state.
Yeah. So that could be interesting to try out if I ever revisit the game. The only issue that I'm thinking is the difference is where it comes with the amount of screen that you're able to see.
Yeah, you're much more zoomed in than you are in this game here.
Yeah, and not only are you more zoomed in, but you have screen distortion, and you also have the light being quite small. And dark. So it might actually be hard to tell what you can and can't dodge into. I think the last thing I want is the player to say, "That didn't touch me. Why did I lose the game?"
Which is another big factor in There's a Zombie in My Closet. You can see that I got a really intense lighting effect with a small positional effect on whatever direction the player is looking in, or if there's a light source like a TV or a window. Because again, that's just a classic way of doing our best to restrict information from a top-down perspective. Because otherwise, if it's first person, then yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can only see what is directly in front of you in a specific cone, but it's much harder to make it work in a top-down perspective.
Actually, I do have a question. So I had a really annoying bug. I think it's a bug. When it came to the shadow component in Unity. So whenever I attached the shadow component, the experimental shadow renderer thing, and then for some reason in the areas between where like the rooms connected, it would do this weird thing where it would overlay the shadows between each other, and also like the side shadows would not obscure the object. So it would create these really weird sort of tunnel effects as you would move past them, and it felt wrong. Have you ever come across anything like that? That's the question.
No, because these were built in Game Maker. And I didn't even meet the lighting engine in this game. This was made years ago. So
that's fair.
I'm not exactly sure what would be the cause of that, but as you said, the feature is still experimental. The only thing I can think of is that maybe it's picking up on some geometry scenes. Like you said, that it's between two rooms. Are the rooms like separate entities that are patched together, or how does
they're
it
not
work
patched
exactly?
together? They're separate entities. I'm not 100% sure how to patch stuff together without slowing down the actual generation of the entire thing.
That's my only guess. Is that I know that sometimes, and it would be a thing that would happen in this game, for sake of analogy. Like the doors are physics objects that you can like open and shut, and it would be really easy for light to leak through the joint on the door that was the hinge joint. So I'm imagining that something similar could be the cause of what you're describing. Because the these light cast simulations don't always play well with geometry seams. Even if they look fine to an observer, there might be something else going on under the scene, under the what am I trying to say here? Behind the scenes.
I get it. I get the point. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think that we're just about good to wrap things up here, but thank you so much for taking the time, first of all, to share the game, and second of all, to join me in this conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you as well. Can I have one last plug?
Go for it.
So, one last plug. I'm making a game called Goblin Game. It's about being a goblin and playing with a bunch of bugs in your room and a button and lint.
Is this why the Patreon was called Goblin Friend?
Goblin Friend is a long-running inside joke with basically a couple of people that I know of. So yeah, kinda.
All right. Well, make sure that you link your Patreon on your itch.io page. That'll make it easier to find as well.
Yes, I'm holding off on that until I actually have my copy of piplib fully ready to upload, because I don't want to promise piplib and then people actually sign up and like, I don't actually have the thing that they promised.
Well, you could always make it a like a threshold thing, right? Like you can say when I get to X many patrons, then it'll be a in-progress reward.
I guess it's just it's more of the I need like an hour or two to look through my documents and find it, rather than I'm holding off until I actually have people. Yeah, it's more of a competence thing than a polishing thing.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, yeah, sorry. Thank you very much.
No trouble. And yeah, please feel free to send anything else that you've made that you'd like feedback on my way in future. But for now, have a good evening, and thanks again for coming on the show.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.